bit like, to make it pay for itself. But if we compare, so this is the base of a herbal ley that's been utilised in a standard rotational grazing method, and this is a herbal ley that's been rested. So it actually kind of indicates to me that it's almost as much the management as it is things like seed rate and establishment that is leading to these gappy swards. Well, we want dense swards. Either us always want to be covered with residues, or we want dense swards that cover and protect our soils. So a few things to leave you with, some suggested practices, things like Rob Havard's bale grazing or under fence feeding, looking at introducing maybe forage crops into standing pasture, or working with sort of mob grazing and sort of high stock density operations. So how can you make all this stuff work for you? How do you make your data gathering really count? Well, for me, basically, the take home is doing small scale on-farm trials, as a way to get genuine feedback from these novel practices that you might be road testing on small areas, and by doing that, by having sort of maybe 2 or 3 different treatments in the same field, you get more of an understanding of why a particular technique worked, because if you just do a single treatment in a single field, it might work, great, and then you want to repeat it, but you want to repeat it in a dissimilar situation or a dissimilar location, then it's less likely to work. So by having a little bit of variation that we create, by having different treatments, like different stocking rates, like different stocking density, for example, and utilisation rates. So here's a few different suggestions for that. So the variations you might be looking at are different rest periods, different stocking density, different utilisation rates. So 1/2 could be a standard utilisation rate, maybe 50%, one could be 30%. So they've got one side at 50, you come back up at the other at 30, and then you can measure the grass growth following that. And one interesting bit of feedback we had this year from a farm that I'm consulting on in Kent is that because of the drought, they had to graze one of their fields which had been shut up for hay, but they had to get onto it because they had no other forage basically. So they grazed standing hay, if you like, or overstood crop, strip grazed it, and that field regrew much faster than the neighbouring field which had been cut for hay, for example, and the other neighbouring fields that had been grazed. So I'll leave that there, but basically one of the things you can do is to use things like exclusion cages to kind of create fake bits of grazing on your fields, if you like. So you can shut up small areas of your paddocks, graze around them, and leave what's in that cage ungrazed. So if you're on a 30-day rest period, you go into that field, you come back again 30 days later, you'll not only be able to measure the dry matter quantity of the utilised field, you'll also be able to get the dry matter quantity of the shut up. So you get a value for 60 days and a value for 30 days. So it will get you more feedback, basically. So I think that's the watchword. If we want to identify opportunities to get feedback, where is there variation in the farm? Where is there a bit of grass that got fenced out, or is it a bit on the edge of some woodlands? How is that performing differently? And record that information and put it up side by side. Okay, so how do we put this into action? Using tools like grazing charts, grazing planning, and basically scenario planning. This is the main challenge that affects us as managers, is that the farming problem, the grazing problem, is an incredibly complex problem. There are hundreds of permutations once you add in breeds, rainfall, all these different, pasture levers, for example, different calving times, different, finishing times. The options, the variables become almost unmanageable, basically. So using tools like grazing charts and grazing planning and working with scenarios enables you to be able to compare different worked options side by side and critique them and identify what the strengths and weaknesses are for each different scenario, from which you can then condense a plan that will work. So the things I'll leave you with to go home and hand over to John. So the goal is to turn sterile subsoil into fertile topsoil through the action of plant roots and microbes, which we will then harvest from and turn it into meat and sales. It all starts with observation. Yeah. So get your eye in and start looking, and then record those observations, however you want. It doesn't mean to be an app. It could be a diary, whatever, basically. Something you can refer to. Aggregation is the primary measure of soil health, and it is easy to spot. So that's the other thing, it's about getting your eye in. So do spade samples and learn what to look for. Just keep looking. Maybe even keep some of your original spade samples, like the one we took today. Just pop it on a shelf, basically, and you can keep looking back at that, doing a little slate test with it, for example. And the final things I'd like you to sort of take home, if you like, is to let your management goals dictate your practice, rather than being bound by technology or infrastructure. Yeah. Try and strip away those barriers so that you can move the cows when it's best for the pasture. Yeah. Not that you're limited because the water's not in the right place. I haven't got quite enough fencing. Remove all those barriers, and then you can start pushing those levers up. We want to be able to get into fifth gear when we want to go 80 miles an hour. Yeah. Plenty of times we want to go 8 miles an hour because we want to get to our place, our journey, quickly. So experiment with novel techniques, monitor and record your results, and initially do stuff more intensively until you get your eye in. So thanks for that. And I'll now hand over to John. And I think we'll do some Q&A once we do the